Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Dr. Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Dr. Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner, share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Dr. Tina.
Today, we're talking about pregnancy loss, the kind of grief that's often not spoke about. Our guest today will share that 1 out of 4 women experience being a bereaved mom. But do you know 1 out of 4 women that are talking about it, and why? And what would their life look like if they were no longer carrying this secret pain and gave themselves permission to be free, to talk, and to breathe and let other people support them? Let's get into this conversation now. All the way from Australia, here to Widowhood Real Talk with Tina. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I don't know if this is a conversation we'll be starting off with laughing, but we are. So laughing does exist. Introduce yourself. Tell us, and not only introduce yourself, but tell us how you went from this topic to the #1 podcast.
Thank you for asking that. I essentially created everything that I had. So that was missing that I needed. I guess I should introduce myself. So my name is Sharna Southan. I am a pregnancy loss practitioner, educator, and essentially, like I just said, everything that I created was everything that I needed in my healing journey. It took a few years for it to sort of eventuate putting all the puzzle pieces together. But going through my own experience of a miscarriage, I needed support that wasn't there. No one was talking about pregnancy loss. No one was talking about even what I was going to experience through that loss. And everything that they were telling me that my body was going to go through is completely different to actually what I was experiencing. So I ended up Googling everything. Me and my husband were trying to just figure everything out. We're like, what is happening? Why is this happening to my body? How long is this going to last for? But it got to the point where I was bleeding too much and ended up being rushed to hospital for an emergency D&C. And the OBGYN that was at the hospital, he was like, your body's not actually kind of like recognizing that you've lost the pregnancy, but you're going through contractions and it's not actually, completing the process itself. So we need to go through this, procedure. And I was like, in my mind, I felt like I was 1 in a million going through this. I'm like, I'm the only woman that's experiencing this because no one is talking about it. What I was given was not right in terms of like the aftercare. And he said 1 in 4 pregnancies end in loss. And I was like, well, if 1 in 4 pregnancies end this way, why is no one talking about it? Why do I feel like I'm the only one going through this? So obviously I was introduced to grief quite early on in my life. My dad died when I was 19. So not that I knew how to process this type of grief, I kind of knew that I had to go through the process. I had to feel my feelings. I had to move through what was coming up for me. There was moments of complete numbness. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to talk to anyone. And I just felt like I was just this shell of a human. And again, just not having anyone talk about what this experience was, what it's actually like. So I kind of, again, was piecing things together for myself in my healing, doing what I felt like was right for me. They got to a point where I needed to see a psychologist. So I reached out to a psychologist that I had used when my dad died. and said, I just need help. I can't do this on my own. So she actually supported me in terms of, I'd written everything out on paper, what I'd gone through, the thoughts that went through my head through the whole experience, the fact that I actually thought I was going to die. I rang my mum and I said, I'm going to die. Like, no one can go through this and bleed the way that I am and survive. So I had viscerally believed that that was my fate. So my psychologist ended up diagnosing me and saying, you've experienced trauma. And I was like, okay, great. Now what? Now what do I do with this experience? So again, I was left to piece things together for myself. And that's when I realized, so there was a sort of a few months where I was like, okay, moving through my healing, going through the transitions that I felt like I needed to go through. And then there was this moment of clarity of just like, I need to do this for someone else. I need to be this person for someone else because I needed that person. And then everything shifted. I was then, not that it was a distraction, but I was then focused on, okay, how do I do this? How do I share what I've been through so that I can help another woman feel less alone? And that's essentially then the foundation of everything that I do, even the podcast that I run, the certification that I have, and any of the support programs that I've created along the way, because it was all through the lens of pregnancy loss and how a woman is actually feeling holistically, mentally, physically, emotionally, how she's moving through her loss. So very
Thank you.
long way of
This is a lot, and I'm actually glad that we started laughing. And on the pre-podcast discussion, we talked about the ebb and flow of life. These are heavy topics, and I want people to know that the space of heaviness is not where we live our life all the time. We hold space for people there, but it's important to know that we laugh and we joke and we do different things because life does continue. It may look different, but it is continuing, and we would want people to have happiness, moments of joy, and places where they are pleased with their existence and where they are in the world. So I don't take that back. I embellish that. Knowing this work is so personal based on your own experience, where do you think you found the ability, strength, or bravery to lead these types of conversations and not just listen? You could have chosen to be only guest on other people's podcasts and tip in and out. And going back to 1 in 4 people have had this experience. And when the pre-podcast conversation, we were talking about how there are very few people broaching this topic. So you had the bravery to experience this and then hold space for others.
To be honest, I just feel like that it could go back to, how I'm wired as a child. I was an elite athlete, so there was just a different way of me viewing things. And I started off, to be honest, I did start off in that one-on-one support space and supporting bereaved mothers directly. But I ended up having women reaching out to me, asking me, how do I become that support person? And for a very long time, I kept saying, I don't know. I can't be that person. I don't know how to do that. But then when I reflected back over also my job as a dental nurse, they ended up employing me to train the new dental nurses to come through. So I used my personal experience in not knowing anything about the dental industry. Coming in, what I did was I literally drew every single drawer in that dental room. I wrote down every single little thing that was in that drawer so that if the dentist asked for it, I knew exactly where to go, what I was looking for. I kind of designed my own manual. And when I was sort of thinking over things in my life where I just had this natural ability to step into, okay, I need to lead myself. I need to do this first for me. So I said no to the initial lot of women who were saying, can I learn how to do that? And I was like, I don't know how to do that. I've just done some courses and put things together myself, like a puzzle. Like I don't know how to bring that to the world. And then I had more reach out down the track. And I was like, okay, this is something bigger than me. It's something bigger than what I'm doing. How do I do that? How do I make that happen? And when I realized I'd already done it in my life, in different areas of my life, I'd written out manuals for dental nurses who ended up, when they came in, they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I was like, oh yeah, that was easy. That just, that was like a Tuesday afternoon. I kind of put that together for you guys. I realized that was a natural gift that I had. So I took what I created, or I essentially took my experience. I call it like my transitions of healing, what I physically and mentally went through. It was almost like each stage of my healing journey. I stripped that back, and then that became the foundation of the programs, of the courses, because then in creating it that way, I was able to go, okay, this is exactly, if you were going to sit across from a woman who has experienced pregnancy loss or stillbirth, this is the thoughts that she's thinking. These are the emotions that she's feeling. This is the trauma that potentially her body is trying to process. It's not medical. It's not something where you're like, okay, this is what the definition of this is, and this is what the medical system's going to do. I'm like, no, this is focused on the woman, because that's come from my healing journey. And then I kind of built it out from there. I realized I needed to do more training for me. Once I realized I was physically experiencing trauma, I was like, well, I need to know more about this. I need to know more about the trauma and how to support someone else through that. And then I realized there was like the neurobiology part was actually connected quite intricately to the body as well. So I was like, well, I need to learn more about that. I need to learn more that it's not just, the body, and it's not just the head, and it's not just all of these individual pieces. How everything is working together, how your body is working together, and how it needs to heal together as well.
Thank you for that. Let me circle back. You mentioned the term DNC. For people who are hearing this conversation, can you elaborate on what that means?
It's a procedure that they go in and they kind of just take out the baby. They take out all of the tissue that is related to that pregnancy. So it is a way essentially to complete the pregnancy, for your body to know, okay, there's nothing there anymore. And you can then go through the healing process. I didn't know of this world at all. So that was like, everything was so new to me when they were explaining what was happening. I was on morphine. So all that part of that experience is quite a blur, but it essentially is completing the miscarriage. Like my body couldn't do it on its own. So it went out, they go in and they take everything out for you. And there's so much, like I wished that I was given more to remember my pregnancy by. I was never told. I don't know. I think my baby had died at 7 weeks gestation. So there would have been something there. I don't know, looking back, if I would have wanted to see anything. I'm not sure. Okay. But just, I was never given the opportunity to make that decision for myself. They were just like, you've got to go in, this is what we do, and then you're out and you're in recovery and you're sent home with nothing. Yeah.
Tidy and done.
Yeah.
When you say the term bereaved mother, at first I thought that was a mother. Well, when you say bereaved mother, what does that mean versus what I may have had interpreted to represent?
I think when we go through loss, we really struggle to identify what we are, and we are still a mum to that baby. So I say bereaved mother in the sense of that you are still a mum and you are grieving the loss of your child. I guess it can mean, and the same with, when I mentioned pregnancy loss, there's so much that falls under that. And I guess there's so much that falls under bereaved mother as well. Just in my eyes, that's the sort of reference point I have.
That is an actual beautiful term, because when you hear miscarriage, it describes an activity, something that happened. But when I hear your interpretation of bereaved mom, especially for that woman that she may have never brought a child into this world, and she may feel like that loss didn't count, but it did. And she was and still is a mother. That is important for identity, correct?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things that happens with pregnancy loss is you lose your sense of self and identity in that, because then you don't know who you are, where you fit, what label you can put on yourself. Like, am I a mom? Did what I go through count? Does that exist in the eyes of society? And it does create a huge identity fracture. And knowing that for myself personally, there was questions that I was asking myself the whole time, because I didn't have a pregnant belly. I didn't have anything outward for people to go, oh, okay, your baby died. Like you had a pregnancy and now it's not there. So then where do I fit? Were they real, like enough for society to deem me a mum? But I think that identity piece is huge, and it just ripples out through so many different elements of a woman's life after loss. And to be able to know that you are a mom and you can celebrate, you can celebrate Mother's Day, you can celebrate all of those things that society does on the outside for mums that have children, earthside, you can still participate in that. It's just a choice that you make. I made that choice. I was like, okay, that's who I'm going to identify with, because I was a mum. That pregnancy was real and it made me a mum.
That is a lot to consider. And when you mentioned hearing your experience and then thinking one of four, why the conversation doesn't exist, it could possibly be just how hard it is to have that conversation, or to be able to outwardly speak and say, this happened to me, that we rather just keep it private. No one knew. It wasn't shown. No one was aware. I don't want people looking at me strange. I don't want the pity look. But inside, there's a lot of things that are still unsettled. For the 1 in 4 that are listening to this podcast, and it's kind of like right here in their throat, and they wish they could say something. And it could have been 10, 20 years, but it's still right there. What would you share with them? The power of sharing your story, what it's done for you and other women.
I think for me, just personally realizing that when I started sharing what happened to me, I had a lot of women reaching out going, that happened to me too. So I was only sharing that it had happened. And what that gave permission for other women to do was share their story as well. And it, like you said, it doesn't matter if it was a week ago, a year ago, 10 years, 20 years. I think once we are able to open up and share about what our story is, and especially with this topic, because there is so much stigma around it, so much like, okay, well, society maybe didn't see me pregnant, so why should I talk about it? But then inside your body is screaming, like you're trying to navigate these big emotions, possibly trauma. Like for myself, I experienced trauma, and you can't ignore that. That affects how you show up as a partner. That affects how you show up in your workplace. That affects how you show up if you have living children. So when we start to share our story, it gives permission for someone else to go, oh, she shared hers. Hers might have been quite similar to mine. Maybe I can share mine too. Or, at least just allow that to be okay. to maybe one day be the normal where we can start sharing our story more openly and not receive the pushback essentially from society that we do get now.
Thank you. What if someone, let me say this, the choice to share our story, the choice to allow ourselves to grieve, the choice to allow ourselves to receive help, and for the people around us to know that we are suffering. In the work you do with people, have you had an experience where someone could not bring themselves to allow that? And if so, how did that impact how they did show up with a partner in life, in work, and other things?
I haven't personally worked with people, with women who have chosen that. I have been in spaces where I've seen that conversation play out. And there was this one lady who consistently, for I'd say over a year, just kept reaching out to me wanting support. But every time I offered support to her, she wouldn't do it. And then I would see her post into a Facebook group consistently grieving in pain. And she'd been in that space, from what I remember, for about 10 years. And from what I know, your pain doesn't go away. It'll intensify over time. I totally get it. Not moving, not healing is probably a lot more comfortable, because healing and moving forward is going to bring things that maybe you're not prepared to do or to see or to witness or to feel, and it can be scary. But I think when you choose not to do the things like I witnessed in this lady, she kept reaching out. She not that she was actually working with me at the time, because that wasn't what she was intending, that she only wanted kind of like free tools that she could use, but she still chose not to do them. And then she was still showing up really consumed by her pain. And I think that is a choice. Like when we choose not to do the things that maybe we know we should, because it doesn't have to be your forever place. The pain that you're in doesn't have to be forever. When we choose not to do the work, I get it. It's scary to do it, but also you are choosing to continue with that same pathway. And from everything that I know for myself and the work that I do and the clients that I've served, when you can choose to do that for you, there is so much beauty on the other side of it. It's not easy, but also it's going to get you to the place that you know is possible for you. If you want to be happy again, you want to be able to enjoy life again, that is possible. But when we choose not to do it, it compounds over time, and it will intensify. And at some point, something has to give. There will be maybe health issues, sicknesses, maybe you have a complete sort of breakdown, whether it's a mental illness. Like there is something that your body will say, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep going the way that you're going.
That is very true. And earlier you spoke about the neurological impact of grief. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more, as far as, and maybe what surprised you about finding out about that?
Yeah, I think it's all very fascinating, how our bodies, and I think I often wonder, because this is where my brain goes. I'm just so geeky and I nerd out on all of that stuff. And then I wonder, I'm like, does anyone even really want to know what happens? But because, like I said, our body is always in constant communication, and it's not an either or. Like it's not your brain or your body. It's not going to see a therapist and then totally ignoring everything else that's happening below the head. What's actually happening is a direct communication, especially if you want to fall pregnant again, especially if you want to have a healthy outcome potentially for that new pregnancy. When you go through pregnancy loss, your brain and your body make this direct correlation. It's like an equation that pregnancy equals danger, pregnancy equals loss. So if you don't work on that equation, between the chemicals that are released from your brain into your body and the communication that's coming from your body to your brain. The end result is there's a part of your brain that obviously is in control of your reproductive system. And that part of your brain, it's kind of at the end of all of the other signals that go through your body. If all of those signals are signaling danger, your body, that part of your brain is going to be like, okay, no, we're going to shut down reproduction. And what it does is it suppresses a chemical that is meant to obviously enhance your fertility. So your brain has actually made the call, okay, let's suppress this chemical. And then so your reproductive organs go essentially offline. And then your body's receiving that information, okay, it's not safe to reproduce right now. Until you can work on that initial equation, until you can stop that alarm bell sounding in your brain, that's also sending a signal to your body that it's not safe to go there. And then it's also in the felt sense of your body, pregnancy equals danger. So like I said, it's not an either or. Sometimes your body can trigger that alarm, that signal of like, this is unsafe. But sometimes the memory of certain things or the association of things that your brain has made can automatically sound that alarm as well. And then it's like this cascade of events that end up resulting in that your body is just like, it's not safe. Pregnancy isn't safe. So the one thing that she wants the most, that desire that she wants the most, is what her body is telling her is dangerous. And so it shuts everything down. And I think what surprised me, I already knew about the trauma element because I could feel it in my body. I knew it. But you don't necessarily understand all of the chemical signals that are going on inside of your brain. Like you can't feel that. So making the connection between what was happening in my body and then the communication and the signals that were coming from my brain, I was like, of course that's happening. But it was almost like this missing piece. Like I had the trauma understanding and also knew that when we are in a survival state, that our body naturally will not feel safe. It's very primitively designed. It won't feel safe to fall pregnant. But then understanding the chemical signals that are coming from your brain and the sequence of events that kind of lead there was really interesting. And I'm sure I'm only touching on the surface of it all with the whole neurobiology of it.
That's fine. And in line with the idea that our body does not like pain, we as humans don't particularly want pain. And could that be why people stray away from doing the work that you talk about in their grief journey? Because this pain that they're in, I know what this looks like. I've been here. This is fine. I have to hope that work will do something. What if I do all that and nothing happens? What if I do all of these things and it doesn't change my situation? So being here is where I will stay. What would you say to the person that has that mindset?
I get it. It's like you said, humans are very adverse to pain. We don't want to feel pain, and it's very comfortable where you are. And you're probably not feeling too much pain, but I also invite you to ask yourself, what are you feeling? Are you feeling any sense of joy? Are you feeling any sense of aliveness in yourself? Because I know what it's like to be there, and I didn't feel alive. It was like the color had been turned out of my world, and it took my husband to pull me out of it, and it took me a lot of internal conversations with myself to realize what he was seeing. But when we choose to stay there, we're also not choosing to change anything. So if you want something to change, you have to do something different. You have to try something different. And even if it's just 1% different, it doesn't have to be this huge grand gesture of, okay, I'm going to do all of these things. What's 1% different? What's 1% in the way that you feel could be moving you forward? Because like I just said, with all of what's happening in your body, if your body doesn't make the connection that healing is safe, that pregnancy is safe, then the outcome that you want might be further away than what you actually, think is possible, because your body needs to feel safe. So to make your body safe, we have to shift it out of where it's at. And it could be something really, really simple if it's just that 1%.
Thank you. What or do you help people if their husband is totally in a different mindset than where they are in this process of being a bereaved mother?
I think that's one of the hardest things, is because what I know for sure is that men grieve too. They just grieve differently. And my husband and I felt like we were on a completely different page through the whole grieving process. And there was a lot of fights. There was a lot of questioning why he was doing something or why he wasn't feeling the way that I was feeling. And through a lot of the work that I do, I have realized that, and I've actually have a connection in the States with a man that does essentially bereaved father work. And I've spoken to him before, and everything I knew, obviously that was true for me and my healing and my husband, was what he was saying. And I think this is where a lot of times we can get into really dark places in our relationships, is because we assume the other person should be at a certain point doing a certain thing because that's where we're at. But our relationship to the baby, our hormones that were released in that pregnancy, our emotions are all so different to what their relationship was to the baby. A lot of the time, what I found was my husband was just trying to control the situation because he could see that I was falling apart, and he didn't want me to. He was trying to protect me. I didn't realize that. I was just like, why are you talking about those stupid, like insignificant, meaningless things? But he was trying to help me in his way. So I think that's when we can open the communication with them and really have a safe place to talk about where you are, what you're feeling. That was when things started to shift for us. But it has to be a very intentional space. It can't be just a random conversation. And what I found was, with most males, is they don't like to sit and chat. So we went for walks. And so when I spoke to this other man as well, like, he's like, men generally, like, they'll maybe go to a bar, or they'll sit shoulder to shoulder with other men. So go for a walk, do something where you're shoulder to shoulder with them. You're not, face to face, whereas most women like to talk face to face. So being able to open the communication in a safe environment where there's no judgment on either party. And even if the other person doesn't want to talk, like, that's okay too. Just to have that space and to know that that's available.
Thank you. I love that, because we have to remember they love us and they're protecting us, and we're what's important. We didn't get here because we weren't trying to have a child, and we're both trying to deal with it in our own way.
Yeah.
If someone's listening to this, well, the person, I should say, that is listening to this conversation, what is one thing that you would really want them to take away from this discussion?
That you're not alone. And you've probably heard that, like, in multiple different ways and from multiple different people, or maybe on social media, you see that a lot. You're not alone, but you're not. There are people out there who know how you feel. There is support for you. The one thing I would invite you to do, if you aren't ready to seek support or someone to talk to, is to just sit with where you're at. What do you need? What do you feel like you need? Not what other people are going to tell you what you need, or how far along you should be, or how much emotion you should be feeling. I'm a very emotional person. So for people to tell me, oh, you shouldn't be crying, you shouldn't be grieving, I was like, well, this is me. This is who I am, and I'm going to cry right now, regardless of how far out you are from your loss. Like, you need to witness where you are, and you need to know what it is that you believe in for you, you stand in for you. And then when you're ready, reach out, because there is people out there who do know how to support you through that. Sometimes it's not going to come from a therapist or counselor. They absolutely have their place, but what I notice is sometimes you need something different, and that's okay. So if you are seeing a therapist or a counselor and it's not working, don't stay just for the sake of staying. Find someone who can really understand where you're at, what you're feeling, and help you move forward.
Thank you. Where can people connect with you?
I am mostly on Instagram. So if you want to reach out to me there, everything that I share is an extension of me and what I believe. So that's reproductive loss leadership. And also the podcast page has a page of its own, which is Pregnancy Loss Podcast or Pregnancy Loss _podcast. Obviously, if you're experiencing pregnancy loss, I have a lot of conversations on the podcast specifically around that. My business page, the Reproductive Loss Leadership, is essentially the gaps that I see in pregnancy loss care. And why you still might be feeling the way that you're feeling is because you haven't been able to be met yet by a professional who can fully see the whole picture of what you're going through.
So I like to give my guests an opportunity to be the podcast host. This may not be as challenging for you because this is what you do. So any questions you may have of me?
It's different though, because it's not my podcast.
Okay, let's see if you struggle. Doubt it, but okay.
Yeah. No, I think we all navigate grief differently. I needed to be on a mattress in the lounge room watching Shrek, the movie, like over and over and over, just to help me through what I was feeling. How were you able to navigate grief for yourself?
I was a workout junkie. I actually moved the elliptical machine into the front room. So if I was going to be up at these odd hours, I was on the elliptical. I was doing kickboxing. And I think I needed to hit something and not be in trouble for doing that. So that was a safe way to do that. It was also combination of my faith, reading the Bible more, understanding about this limited life that we have, and understanding what my faith said about the life there afterwards. Allowing my family and friends to hold me up and to see that this was the most difficult experience I've ever had and I needed them, and accepting the help that they would bring me. And all of that, I would say, has been the way that for me, journaling, a therapist, just like grief impacts us in so many different ways, I realized for me, I needed a lot of different ways to be able to go through this. I had two siblings on the West Coast. I had somebody in different time zones, so I had different people to call because this was hard and still is. And being honest that you mentioned earlier that to some extent grief will always be a part of my journey, but what it looks like, I believe a lot belongs to me on how I navigate it and how I work in it and through it.
Yeah. And I love how you said that you had to have multiple different ways to move through it, because we don't just wear one pair of shoes for like every occasion. You can't wear heels and go and run out, do a workout in them. We need to understand that it is like creating a team of things around us, creating something that can really hold us in all of those different elements of grief, and to know also that it's not just this one and done thing. Like there's not one moment in your life then it's just going to disappear. It's just something that you learn to carry and hold. And like you said, it is then how you hold it and then how you navigate it each time it comes up.
I would like to also add the epiphany that came one time in therapy, that this cannot be fixed. This cannot be resolved. I think when people think, well, if I work with a coach, I work with a therapist, this is going to become fixed. Yeah. The only way that it would be fixed if it never happened. Everything is going to be different. We don't get that version of what that looked like. That reality seems very simple, but in profound grief and realizing the finality of it was hard, but it also gave me permission to say, we're going to have to do something different because I will drive myself mad trying to hold on to what is impossible to get again.
Yeah. And that's what drove me into depression, was trying to hold on, and it doesn't help you. It just, and I think that's where we think, if I do hold on, everything will be okay. And when we choose to hold on, we choose to, it's almost like we do stay in suffering. And I ended up being diagnosed with depression at that point. So it doesn't serve us to try and hold on to what everything was like when these people, when everything was different.
I would agree. All righty, that was a good question. Any more?
Not off the top of my head. That was just the first thing that came to me. I guess because it was your husband that died, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for me, when my dad died, I was 19, and obviously trying to navigate my life as a child without him. He was only 49, so he was only young. And I still often think about how my mum navigated it, because it was her person, the one she'd chosen for her, like, to grow old with. She's a ball of anxiety right now in her life. And I feel like it's because she wasn't able to process a lot from when he died. So I guess my question is, like, how were you able to, I know you said you had the support of your family, which I know my mum had as well, but then there was that also just the navigating life, just general day-to-day things without him, without being able to ask him a question. How were you able to navigate that?
Those are tough. And our son was 19 when his dad passed. I think our daughter was 22. I was grateful that they knew their dad until an adult age. That gave me some peace. Unfortunately, my husband's family had a lot of cardiac issues, and there were a lot of conversations about if he died before 55, what I needed to do, what that would look like, and a lot of things that way. We have godparents for our children, which would legally be their guardian if my husband Mark and I both pass. So there was a lot of opportunity of having them lean into our children as they were growing up. So when Mark passed, I was like, wow, we kind of set ourselves up for what success would look like in this situation. And I would ask my brother or my children's godfather, like, what do you think about these different choices I'm needing to make? Because just because they're in their 20s, mothering is forever. Parenting doesn't just, you're 18 and off you go. It's like, no, she's 30 and she could be right here on my lap if she could. And I remember it was also a struggle, and my therapist saying, your children have you. I was struggling, like, Tina would do this, but Mark would do this, and back and forth. And I was like, I can only be who I am. And I had to come to terms with the decision I'm making has to be enough, because that's all I have to give. I can't wrestle trying to be him and myself. And when I let that go, trying to be both people, I didn't break them. They're still here. So I had to do the best of what I had. But it was hard changing and accepting what version of my future would look like versus on what I planned. And that part, continually having to make the steps towards further away from what I had planned it would be to the version is now. I'm happy. I do enjoy my life. The anniversary of his pass and his birthday are still really difficult times for me. And I assume that they probably will be for a lifetime because I spent 32 years with him. But it has been helpful to lean into my girlfriends and my other relationships. I'm glad that not only did I have a good marriage with my husband, but I maintained relationships outside of that. So when I was starting to dip low, they would come and pull me out because those relationships were independent. My girlfriends know me, and that has been amazing.
I think that's what my mum needs. I think she withdrew a lot from everyone at that point. And even now still, you know, she's still very much withdrawn, and she's remarried and happy, but a lot of those connections that she had when we were kids, like with outside other families, they have all dropped off. And I feel like that makes it a lot harder. And to be honest, like what you said, you know, you've lost your husband, but then you've had your friends sort of come in and hold you. You know, I was 19, my brother was 17, and my sisters were 15. So there was a lot of, she felt like she had to hold it together for us. And I think in doing that, she sort of pulled away from so much else that could have supported her and could still continue to support her too. But yeah, I still wonder, like I do, I look at her and I'm like, I don't know what it would be like. You know, my husband got to 49, which was when my dad died. And I was like, holy hell, like it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, I couldn't imagine losing you now, like my mum did. And to have she had four little kids, like 4 young kids. So, you know, I didn't think that him getting to that age was going to be so emotional for me. But I was like just hugging him extra tight. I'm like, don't go anywhere.
Exactly. Well, thank you for this conversation. Thank you for sitting on the other side of the podcast and letting me lead the conversation. I also like to allow my guests to wrap up the conversation with any final thoughts, because this is your conversation. I was just able to help guide it.
Oh, no, I really enjoy sharing my story, because I don't ever want to sit on the other side of other people and then think that I'm this unicorn person because I've been able to build all of this stuff from my personal experience. And I'm not. I'm just a normal human like everyone else that went through something really challenging and just saw the possibility of, I can change this. I can use my experience to change this. So I love sharing my story. And being asked questions that potentially spur something a little bit different in the way that I show up. But I think, you know, if there was anything to leave with, it would just be to give yourself grace and permission to just be wherever it is that you are. If it's hard, then let it be hard. Don't try and rush through it. Witness where you are and just allow those emotions to come through. And like you said before, sometimes these emotions need a physical outlet, and our body knows that. So what does that look like? Maybe it is journaling. Maybe it is that you have to go buy a punching bag or punch a pillow, punch the bed, scream into a pillow. But just allow it to be there. Try not to rush through it, because the moment we do try to rush through it and dismiss it, it just pushes pause on that emotion. It doesn't stop it at all. It will just unpause at a later time. So allow yourself to be.
Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you for having me, Tina.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune into Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then, visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.